We're getting this underway. We are here. It's kind of the secret session. It's a closed, special party here for the reading of the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. So welcome into this special session. Only you and a few select people are here, and that's good. We are really kind of getting into probably one of the most sort of really important parts of this book, especially for modern people. Some people, the historical thing, whatever, not all that interested. But if you're a modern person reading and you're interested in sort of self-help or, introspection kind of things, this is the really, really important part of the book. So we're going to have fun with that. And I'm going to do this one a little bit differently because so far I've been sort of taking pieces out of the book and skipping sections and commenting on them. This part of the book for the next 6 pages is so important that I'm going to basically read the whole thing. I'll stop at times and we'll discuss things, but there's nothing to cut out. It's all good. Right? There's no extra material. Nope. In fact, we're not even going to get through the entire section. But what we're covering here are the virtues. And Benjamin Franklin, even for quite a while, was thinking about producing a book called The Art of Virtues, and he'll mention it in here. He never ended up doing that, but this part of the book gives us the kernel and summary of what the art of virtues was going to be about. And, Benjamin Franklin is somebody who is always looking at himself and saying, how can I do this better? What did I do wrong here? And that's a super good trait. We'll even see that this is sort of, maybe not the first, but it certainly marks the beginning of at least, let's say, American self-help books, right? Maybe they had self-help books in in Great Britain before that in some ways, but what he's talking about here is self-help, which is a good thing. We're always looking for ways to fix things. Yeah.
Real quick before we get started, I want to just shout out Heather Torrey for her super chat.
Thank you, Heather.
And Ryan is out today, so I'm taking this one.
Yeah, I'm your host, John Townsend. Oh. Forgot that. And behind the console, I've got Aaron instead of Ryan because
hey, everyone. He is. Yeah, Ryan's out. Just got back from an awesome video shoot. Yeah. One that I'm really excited about.
Well, I'm excited too because I haven't seen it. I just know what it was about. That's what the incredible
secrets, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what the incredible part about what we're doing here on the channel now is that I can work on this video and somebody else can be shooting a video, and it's really cool. So we are in the virtues section of Benjamin Franklin here. In this edition, we're on page 85, about in the middle, and off we go. Let's get started. It was about this time that I conceived the bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection. Well, we don't really have to go much further. Don't we all want to strive for a moral perfection? But strive is the word we're looking at. He seemed to think maybe he could get there. I wish to live without committing any fault at any time. I would conquer all that either natural inclination, custom, or company might lead me into. As I knew, or thought I knew, what was right or wrong, I did not see why I might not always do the one and avoid the other. Well, bud, better people than you have tried it. Anyway, but soon I found I had undertaken a task more difficult than I had imagined. While my care was employed in guarding against one fault, I was often surprised by another. Habit took the advantage of inattention, and inclination was sometimes too strong for reason. I concluded at length that the mere speculative conviction that it was in our interest to be completely virtuous was not sufficient to prevent our slipping, and that the contrary habits must be broken and good ones acquired and established before we can have any dependence on a steady, uniform rectitude of conduct. And for this purpose, I therefore contrived the following method. Before I go any further, I thought this part of, getting rid of contrary habits and breaking contrary habits and getting, acquiring new ones and establishing them, really important consideration. And it made me immediately, as I was reading it, think about something that's really popular today, the Atomic Habits book. And if you read in the Atomic Habits book, there's even a particular page, I think it's 186 or something like that, where he mentions Benjamin Franklin specifically and outlines some of the Benjamin Franklin thoughts on it. But this is all about that. Well, the subtitle, An Easy and Proven Way to Build Good Habits and Break Bad Ones. So it is a really important and good concept that we have to, it's like, how do we get out of that rut of doing the wrong things or things that, keep us from, anyway, Benjamin Franklin's going to help us out here. So here's the following method. In the various enumerations of moral virtues I'd met with in my reading, and he reads a lot, I found the catalog more or less numerous, as different writers included more or fewer ideas under the same name. Temperance, for example, was by some confined to eating and drinking, and while others it might be extended to mean the moderation of every other pleasure, appetite, inclination, or passion, bodily or mentally, even to our avarice and ambition. I propose to myself, for the sake of clearness, to use rather more names than fewer ones annexed to each, or with fewer ideas annexed to each, than a fewer names with more ideas. And I included under 13 names of virtues, all that at that time occurred to me as necessary or desirable, and annexed to each a short precept, which fully expressed the extent I gave to its meaning. And I think it's interesting. So it's not like there weren't lots of other classical writers, probably from thousands of years earlier, whether they're, Socrates or the Ten Commandments, right? Things like that. There's all these ideas. Here's virtuous conduct, and here they are enumerated under, specific heads. And, some of them probably do. It's like, there's only 3 rules, right, in the whole world, and they put all these ideas underneath these specific rules. He says, let's break them out into 13. I thought 13 was an interesting number to break them out into, but 13 so that, he can kind of clearly, and I think he gets to the reason why he really breaks them out into 13 instead of 6, right, and kind of bundles them together. But here we go. These names of virtues with their precepts were, number 1, temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Number 2, silence. Speak not but what may benefit your others and yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. Number 3, order. Let all those things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. 4, resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought. Perform without fail what you resolve. Number 5, frugality. Make no expense but to do good to others or yourself, i.e. waste nothing. Number 6, industry. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. Number 7, sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit. Think innocently and justly, and if you speak, speak accordingly. Number 8, justice. Wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Number 9, moderation. Avoid extremes. Forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. Interesting. Number 10, cleanliness. Tolerate no uncleanness in body, clothes, or habitation. Number 11, tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles or at accidents common or unavoidable. 12, chastity. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or to the injury of your own or others' peace and reputation. And finishing up with 13, humility. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. Wow, okay. There's a bunch here. I really like the way he's broken it out, and then his little sort of subheadings, little titles, little explanations. And it's interesting what he does with the explanations. If you see them written out, they tend to be paired, and there'll be one part, and then there'll be a semicolon and another part. Some of them aren't like that, but most of them are. And it's sort of broken down. So it's sort of like, here's a big heading, and then there's almost two ideas underneath this. Sometimes it's two ideas, sometimes it's that idea and an extension, or that idea and an example. So we have temperance, and then we have eating and drinking. And those are separated. Silence, here's the other one, where we'll have a positive, a do this, and a don't do that to it. So silence, speak not but what may benefit others, avoid trifling conversation. So say good things, avoid small talk or just trifling little things. In order, this is fun. Order, there's place, and then there's time. So you want to have order in the physical world, and you want to order the timing you put it together. Resolve, so resolution, resolve to perform what you ought, and then kind of flipping that on its head, perform without fail what you resolve. So resolve to do this thing, then execute on doing that resolving. It's like paired up there. Frugality, make no expense, but to do good to others and yourself, wastes nothing. So really it helps explain that one. Industry, lose no time, and then on the flip side of that, cut off all unnecessary things. So it's like do good things and don't do wasteful things. Sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit, lying. Think innocently and justly. So it's like here there's sincerity, thinking justly and innocently, and then underneath that is justice. So if you speak accordingly. Then we get to justice, and it's like don't do wrong none by injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. So again, a negative first, a positive after. Moderation, this one really interested me, the way he kind of extended the idea. Avoid extremes, and then the extreme here, and maybe it's his extreme, maybe he's writing this part specifically for him, forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. He puts that under moderation. So maybe he was one who, could easily resent people disrespecting him, or doing something that didn't help him out, and it seemed to him that maybe they were doing it just to be anti-Benjamin Franklin or something. And so under moderation, don't resent people for things that happen. So I would have thought maybe that would come under justice or something else, but he puts it here under moderation. 10, cleanliness. We don't need to really, that seems pretty obvious. He doesn't really break that up that much. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles. Seems like one thing, and then, or at accidents common or unavoidable. So there are some things, it's like, that's a small thing, don't worry about it. Or you, on the other hand, it's something you couldn't do anything about anyway. So, what are you going to do, right? Don't be disturbed by that. Chastity, Here, I mean, maybe this is another one of his, it seems like later on in life and in other situations, we think maybe Benjamin Franklin might have a little problem with chastity. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or injury of your own and others' peace and reputation. So, it's like, be careful with that. And then humility, imitate the humbleness of Jesus and Socrates. He doesn't put one above the other. He just puts them right beside each other. It's like, here are two people in antiquity, that show traits that he needs, maybe, don't we all, in humbleness. Wow. Really, really good things. Now, he lists them all out, but then he's like, okay, I've got them listed. What am I going to do about, how am I going to execute on, putting this down? I'm going to take a breath for a second, take a drink.
I like the resenting people in moderation. That's funny. Someone, I think it was Heather, was wondering, do you think he studied people like Marcus Aurelius?
Yeah. So he's doing a lot of studying the classics. He's reading Plutarch's Lives. He's reading, all those classic works that we don't even, it's like, Plutarch's Lives? What? Right? That's just not in our curriculum anymore. But that is the classic curriculum of that time period, and they're looking, they're reading deeply on Socrates. And this is a product of the Renaissance, when all those things were sort of rediscovered and brought back. They were, they're kind of kept through the Dark Ages and all that by, monks rewriting those things. And then, we get to the Renaissance and the Reformation, and some of those things sort of pop back up into the thinking world and become, major ways that we're progressing in that time period. And now we've, built up layer upon layer, and we've kind of forgotten that basement layer of foundational knowledge.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a reason why his work kind of took hold more than some of that pre-work, or was the pre-work like the Marcus Aurelius again, still a little kind of vague and not quite as honed in as what Franklin was writing?
Yeah, it just takes, as we get farther and farther away from those earlier works, it gets harder to translate them into our vernacular, right? And it's harder for us to grasp them. It takes a lot more effort. And so it's just easy for us to, skip those deeper layers and say, here's here are foundation stones. We don't need to go, super deep.
Sure. I guess one thing, because I haven't really been in these live streams all that much, it might be helpful for me and for maybe some other people, maybe a little context of where is he right now when he's writing this.
So we have two different things going on here. He's talking about a period of his life, probably in his mid-20s, but he's writing it in his mid-60s.
So it's almost like what he wished he had.
No, he was doing those things.
Oh, right.
He's saying, in my 20s, I set down these precepts. Now, he knew about these things, and he was trying to achieve some of these things much earlier. He was mentioning this even in his teens. His father, his family had given him a solid foundation of moral teaching, but now he's turning it into, it's like if he's sometimes discarding some of the hard and fast religious orthodoxy at the time, he at least wants the outworkings of that orthodoxy and the morality that it's trying to, bring forth in people.
That's about all I've got right now for questions and things.
Super good. So, my intention being to acquire the habitude, which I'm not sure I've ever read the word habitude before. My intention being to acquire the habitude of all these virtues, I judged it would be well not to distract my attention by attempting the whole at once, but to fix it on one of them at a time, and when I should be the master of that, then to proceed to another, and then so on, till I should have gone through the 13. And as the previous acquisition of some might facilitate the acquisition of certain others, I arrange them in that view as they stand above. So, yeah, so maybe you can't start with you can't start with moderation, first. It's easier if we have all these other things to start off. Let's just do it one at a time. Pretty smart. No, I'm going to be perfect from now on. I got my list, right? No, we're going to do one at a time. Temperance first, as it tends to procure the coolness and clearness of head, which is so necessary when constant vigilance was to be kept up, and the guard maintained against the unremitting attraction of ancient habits and the force of perpetual temptations. This being acquired and established, silence would be more easy. And my desire being to gain knowledge at the same time that I improved in virtue, and considering that in conversation it was obtained rather by the use of the ears than by the tongue, therefore wishing to break a habit I was getting into of prattling, punning, and joking, which only made me acceptable to trifling company, I gave silence the second place. Yeah, so he's telling on himself here. It's like, yeah, I had this problem of prattling, punning, so making lots of pun jokes, which is fun. And just joking, right? It made me acceptable only to trifling company. I think it's interesting. He wants to have acquaintances that aren't just trifling people. He wants to have important acquaintances, and he wants to talk about serious things. And apparently, it's not as easy to talk about serious things when you're prattling or punning. This and the next order I expected would allow me more time for attending to my project and my studies. Resolution, once became habitual, would keep me firm in my endeavors to obtain all the subsequent virtues. Frugality and industry freeing me from my remaining debt and producing affluence and independence, and would make more easy the practice of sincerity and justice, etc., etc. Conceiving then that, agreeable to the advice of Pythagoras in his golden verses, daily examination would be necessary. So I contrived the following method for conducting that examination. So it's not enough to have a list. Now I need to work on that list in order, and I need to have a way that I can examine myself, judge about how we're progressing. Whew. Now, at least we know, we're here, 40 years later. He's talking about, 40 years later, and he can look back. Maybe some of this wasn't as super thought out when he was 25, but he did that. Maybe he didn't know exactly. Now, 40 years later, it's like, well, must be why I did this thing. I don't know. Maybe he was just that good when he was 25, and I'm afraid he probably was. Sharp is not the word for Benjamin Franklin here.
One thing that a couple people were commenting on was, so his thing with puns, right? So there's kind of this overarching, somebody was saying like Puritan ethics or something like that. Is that more of a sign of just kind of how culture was at the time? Maybe not necessarily his particular viewpoints, but I feel like joking around and puns and things are almost a little more accepted now, or I guess like, you know what I mean? Or is that kind of, or is that kind of a little deep? Like,
well, I don't know. I think we look back, and I haven't done extensive reading on this, but just impressions from things that I've sort of read and whatever recently. I think that the Puritans, and he is coming from Boston, so and even though he's in Philadelphia, he's coming from Boston in a Puritan background, that we can have the idea that they were all super duper tight-laced, right? And it's like, well, they might be tight-laced about some things as we look at them today, but in other ways, not nearly so much. So, we might think of them prudish in maybe their language of sexuality, right? They were not. So some of the writings were very, let's say, edited, into the 20th century. It was like, whoa, boy, we're not going to print this kind of stuff, right? So there are some things that I think we totally get wrong about what was going on with Puritan backgrounds and what they were strict about and what they weren't. Obviously, he was, in very jocular company. He was having a lot of fun. He wasn't, Mr. Stiff.
Yeah, he was laid back, but maybe these puns were just terrible. Like bad
I don't think
dad jokes.
They were probably really good.
Yeah,
that's the thing. He's a really smart guy, and so they were probably really good. But he realized that that isn't progressing. The thought in these important conversations he wanted to be having. Those are little rabbit trails. They take you off the wrong direction. No, I need to control that habit and, move forward.
Gotcha. Right on.
Now, you don't want to do that to such an extreme that, it's like, oh, he never talks about anything but important stuff.
Yeah, no fun allowed.
Right.
It's not that.
Now, maybe he was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he obviously wasn't like that when he was young. Let me find my place. Here we go. Following method for conducting that examination. I made a little book to which I allotted a page for each of the virtues, and I ruled each page with red ink so as to have 7 columns, one for each day of the week. Marking each column with the letter of the day, I crossed these columns with 13 red lines, marking the beginning of each line with the first letter of one of the virtues. So we got days of the week, we got virtues. I might, let's see, I've lost my place here. On which line and in its proper column, I might mark with a little black spot every fault I found upon examination to have been committed respecting that virtue upon the day. And then he's got a little picture. See, there's a little chart there, and you can't see it very well, but like in the first column for temperance, there's no dots. And then in the second column, he's got, couple of dot or one dot on one day, one on another. And then the next column, like for O, what is O again? It's order. 2 dots, 1 dot, 1 dot. And I'm thinking, if I made that chart, it would look like a dot to dot. It had just all over. I don't know how anybody would, do as good as this. But anyway, I determined to give a week's strict attention to each of the virtues successively. Thus, in the first week, my great guard was to avoid the least offense against temperance, leaving the other virtues to their ordinary chance, only marking every evening the faults for the day. Thus, if in the first week I could keep my first line marked T clear of spots, I supposed the habit of that virtue so much strengthened and its opposite weakened that I might venture extending my attention to include the next. And for the following week, keep both lines clear of spots, proceeding thus to the last, that I go through a course complete within 13 weeks and 4 courses in the year. So 13 weeks, repeat it again, repeat it again. And like him who, having a garden to weed, does not attempt to eradicate all the bad herbs at once, which would exceed his reach and his strength, but work on one of those beds at a time, and having accomplished the first, proceeds to the second. So I should have, I hoped, the encouraging pleasure of seeing on my pages the progress I made in virtue by clearing successively my lines of their spots, till in the end, by a number of courses, I should be happy in viewing a clean book after 13 weeks daily examination. That's pretty intense, you know. Every day before you go to bed, you get out your little book. Was I temperate today? Did I eat a dozen donuts? I didn't make it, whatever. I don't know. I should try it. It would probably be pretty painful. Maybe that's...
Learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah, probably. This my little book had for its motto these lines from Addison's Cato. Here will I hold, if there's a power above us, and that there is, all nature cries aloud through all her works, he must delight in virtue, and that which he delights in must be happy. There's another quote from Cicero or Cicero, depending on how you want to say it. It's in Latin. I'm not even going to try that. My Latin pronunciation just isn't there. And there's no translation for the Latin. He expects us to know our Latin, which... Another from the Proverbs of Solomon, speaking of wisdom or virtue. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. And conceiving God to be the fountain of wisdom, I thought it right and necessary to solicit his assistance for obtaining it. And to this end I formed the following little prayer, which was prefixed to my table of examination for daily use. O powerful goodness, bountiful Father, merciful guide, increase in me that wisdom which discovers my truest interest. Strengthen my resolutions to perform what that wisdom dictates. Accept my kind offices to my other children as the only return in my power for thy continual favors to me. I used also sometimes a little prayer, which I took from Townsend's poems, viz. Father of light and life, thou good supreme, teach me what is good, teach me thyself, save me from folly, vanity, and vice, from every low pursuit, and fill my soul with knowledge, conscious peace, and virtue pure, sacred, substantial, never fading bliss. The precept of order, requiring that every part of my business should have its allotted time, one page in my little book contained the following scheme of employment for 24 hours of a natural day. I want to stop there. I'm going to go back to the order. So he's got his book with the little chart, but he also needs sort of like what am I gonna, what can I read over and over each day to help me, continue to want to do these virtues, or, how do I remind myself, and how do I get help in this case? So he's got, Cato's quote, and then, Cato's quote even points to, it's got that little parentheses there, and that there is, all nature cries aloud through all her works, that there is some power above, right? He takes the piece of Proverbs, and then he has his own, prayer here, which, if you take a strict or at least very, very abstract view of deism, which many people, and he might even say, he's a deist at times. I don't know, deists, at least in that very abstract sense, are like, well, yeah, there's a God and he winds up the world and walks away, right? And if that is the God of, all deists, then he's not a deist, because he's expecting here, I was like, if that's who God is like, then there's no reason to have a prayer. So obviously Benjamin Franklin has a prayer here. He thinks God isn't somebody who's just wound up the world and walked away, but he has something to do in the world. So there's that. And even this other little prayer here from Townsend's poems, and I have to look up to see what that references to. I did not have a chance to look that one up. Okay, so now we get to order the day. So it's like we've got the book, got the little chart, we've got the the encouraging themes here at the beginning that keeps him on track, and then we have his schedule for a normal day. So precepts of order requiring that every part of my business should have its allotted time. One page of my little book contained the following scheme of employment for the 24 hours of a natural day. In other words, not, just every ordinary day. And then it's kind of broken up on two sides. So in the morning, question, what good shall I do to this day? Or what should I do this day? So he gets up at 5 o'clock, and through 6 and 7, he does rinse, wash, and address powerful goodness. Contrive day's business. Take the resolution of the day. Prosecute the present study and breakfast. So he's doing standard toiletry things. He does the beginning of his little book thing. Resolution of the day, so probably he means the particular virtue he's going to work on that day, I think. And then he's already into studying, so prosecuting the present study. He's always like studying something. And breakfast from 8, 9, 10, and 11, he's got work. At noon, 12 to 1, we have reading or overlooking account books and having lunch, dining. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, he's work again. And in the evening, question, what good have I done today? So reiterating, the beginning question. 6, 7, 8, 9, put things in their places. Boy, that's the one that I probably need to do. Supper, music or diversion. So it isn't all work. There is diversion here. There is music. There's, as they would say them in those Puritan terms, recreation. So recreating. Conversation. And then at the very end, examining the day. So open up that little book and start making your little thoughts. I did this wrong. I did that wrong. Because they're all kind of negatives, I guess. I wasn't able to do those things. So he's even got his little chart for the day. And introspection is at the end. And then it even has, nighttime, 10, 11, 12, sleep. So he's got to remember, he's got to put down on his list, don't forget to sleep, Benjamin Franklin. And he's sleeping, it looks like 7 hours. So he's working hard. He's working hard.
Yeah, mostly people are just kind of following along, hanging out.
Right.
Not a ton of questions. People really wanted you to try that, sing that in Latin.
Gosh. No, I have not done a lot of practicing. And besides, I don't know what it's saying, it makes it all the more difficult. Can't remember. It was in Fall of the House of Usher. Remember that that one
yeah.
sequence in Fall of the House of Usher, which had where I think it was Latin or whatever
Yeah,
it was.
that was. Yeah, I remember.
That was fun.
Cutting that. Yeah,
Yeah, it was interesting
did it.
section. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Oh, what there is one. I can't remember who said it. Oh, shoot, I'd have to go back and find it again. But it was something about when it was something about his time in France and when that falls in with kind of.
Well, some of this he's writing at that time.
Gotcha. Okay, that answered it.
Right. I entered upon the execution of this plan for examination and continued it with occasional intermissions for some time. I was surprised to find myself so much fuller of faults than I had imagined, but I had the satisfaction of seeing them diminish. To avoid the trouble of renewing now and then my little book, which by scraping out the marks on the paper of old faults, to make room for the new ones in a new course, it became full of holes. I transferred my table and precepts to the ivory leaves of a memorandum book, on which the lines were drawn with red ink. That made a durable stain. And on those lines, I'd mark my faults with a black lead pencil, which marks I could easily wipe out with a wet sponge. After a while, I went through one course only in a year, and afterwards only one in several years, till at length I omitted them entirely, being employed in voyages and business abroad, with a multiplicity of affairs that interfered. But I always carried my little book with me. So erasing in the time period generally had to do with, their erasers were little scrapers. So you would just sort of scrape the surface. The paper was so thick. We're used to, thin modern paper, but the paper was so thick that the writing kind of lived up on top. You would just scrape off the ink and you could remark things. So today, if we write with a pen, it's very difficult. So we don't usually correct things. Who's writing things and correcting things, right? But they would scrape that away. And of course, after you scrape it away, after a while, there's no paper left. And then he talks about a ivory memorandum book. Now, we used to carry, we don't any longer, a little ivory, brass and ivory notebook. And it was a little book that had ivory leaves in it, and they were just key tops. We weren't using new ivory, obviously, because it's very illegal. But they would have these little slabs of ivory, thin little sheets, because you can cut it very thin, and you would write on those with a lead pencil, and then you could just wet your thumb and just wipe it right off. So you used them for little quick notes to yourself. And he had one especially made that was ruled with the letters and the days of the week, so that he could put his little marks on that and look at that at the end of the day. Pretty neat little idea. Now, he does, it's like, the more I did that, the less I needed that and needed to go over it and over all the time. And then obviously, life becomes different. So he was specifically sort of training himself up to be more than just a printer. You could kind of see that early on. And, here he isn't in that stage of life in the time period that he's writing for, but, as his life changes and he becomes a diplomat and, other thought leader and traveling, obviously he isn't able to kind of keep up that schedule the same way and keep track of his virtues. I'm going to kind of stop about right there. I think it's a really good place to stop. He's going to continue to talk a little bit more about his virtues, but that kind of sets out his system. And wow, if I was that systematic about my life, I'd probably be able to get a lot more done. Let me tell you.
All right.
What do you think, guys? I think it's just it's interesting. Those, if we remember, like 1 or 2 episodes back, there were the letters, the people that got the first section of the autobiography, and they also knew and hinted at these virtues, and they were really saying, you know, this is a really important part of your book, and you really need to continue it, and the virtues need to be a strong part of it. So you can kind of see that he begins the second phase of his book, and he kind of like jumps right into the virtues. Like, well, this book is supposed to be more than, you know, when he originally writes it, he just basically writes it for his son. And then here, now he knows, well, more people are going to read this. Let me instill some more of this information and make it more than just for family. And so he kind of sets down and really tells us about this virtue thing. And maybe he's like, I'm not going to print it in a book, so I might as well, you know, really lay the system out here, which is super interesting.
Hey, real quick, very nice donation from Dustin Williams. Townsend's Book Club rocks. Thanks, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dustin. Yeah. So we'll jump in and cover some more autobiography of Benjamin Franklin next week. Super thank you for being here on today's episode, and hopefully you've got a chance. Maybe you've been here all along, or maybe you're just in here at the beginning. You need to, you know, zip back and, you know, catch up to where we're at. It is extremely illuminating for understanding Benjamin Franklin, for understanding what the 18th century is like, the differences and similarities. And in some ways, this part of the book is the sort of immortal, or, you know, what the word is? It isn't time sensitive, right? So it's like, it's just as useful today as it was when he wrote it. Really, really good content. And, you know, undoubtedly somebody could probably write a book this thick all about the same content that he just gave us in a nutshell. Really, really interesting stuff. Are we good, Aaron?
We're good.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on this live stream. And I hope you're able to join us on Friday. We'll be doing the regular Nutmeg Tavern live stream. There's likely going to be a video out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. That ought to be a fun one. Nice, fun, pretty pictures. So, nice video tomorrow, and we're just going to keep it up, and I hope you're enjoying it. We're having a great time, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thanks for watching.